We have a few more that have logged in, so we'll get started here shortly. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ron Brown. I'm with ESI Consultants Limited, and we are a DBE supportive services provider for the Illinois Department of Transportation. We assist with technical supportive service assistance. I see we have 37 registered for this presentation. We have quite a few already signed in, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'll share and this is being recorded, by the way, so you'll be provided with a copy of this once we conclude. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. We do ask that you mute yourselves and your devices and keep your video turned off to avoid any distractions to the presenter. If you have any questions, you can enter those into the Q&A box. If there's an option on the bottom of the screen for other panel options, and there's a Q&A tab for that. We'll answer questions throughout the presentation. As I mentioned, this will be recorded and a copy provided to the firms that are in attendance in a follow-up email, and we will include any additional resources that may be helpful to you. And there will also be a short survey following the presentation, so please avail yourself of that opportunity to let us know how we can improve the presentation and provide any ideas for future workshops. Also, if you would please enter your name and your firm name into the chat box so we can have that information as well. Now I will my screen sharing and turn this over to Miss Jenny LaSure, who's going to provide the information today. It's all yours.
Okay, let me get my screen rolling. A little slow this morning. Okay, should be able to see it. So good morning. My name is Jenny LaSure. I am the Consultant Services Unit Chief here in the Bureau of Design Environment at IDOT. So a few things I'm going to go over today. Some of you probably already do business with us, so that might be an overview. But I'm going to go over the bulletin, advertisements, how to bid. I'll do a quick walkthrough of EPAS and what you'll be seeing when you're in the system, some reminders, what happens next once you submit, and just some of our resources. So the bulletin. So where can you find it? You can find it at illinois.gov, doing business, procurements, engineering, architectural, and professional services. And then we have a bulletin tab, and I'll walk through this in our demo as well, of where you can find it. Right now, we actually have an active bulletin out there, PTB 207. So here's a screenshot of it, of where you can find it. So when do we advertise? We actually post our bulletin, which is called the Professional Transportation Bulletin. We call it PTB for short. We do it 4 times a year. We have a very, very strict schedule. And on the website, we also list what we call our tentative PTB schedule, and it looks something like this. So what you can see is it's all numerical. So like the 207 means nothing, 208 means nothing. It's just whatever, comes up next. So like I said, it's the Professional Transportation Bulletin. So right now, highlighted in orange, we have PTB 207. We published back on the 2nd of February. Statements of interest are due the 23rd of February, so the firms have about 3 weeks to do statements of interest. We do have a very, very strict deadline of noon, so if you are going for 207, make sure that your statements of interest are in by noon of the 23rd of February, and then we host selection on April 19th, and that is when we actually release the results. So at least out there on the website, you can see some of the upcoming bulletins we have, like 208, 209, 210, and 211. 208 we will publish in May, 209 will publish in August. So you kind of get an idea on when to mark your calendars. So we do have some extra information that does get posted out there about the bulletin as well. It's called the Negotiation Information Site, and I really don't know why it's called that, to be honest. Probably should change the name. But what it is under, and I'll demo this again in the walkthrough on the website, but under the bulletin link, there is what's called the Negotiation Information, and if you click the Click Here icon, you should see a PTB, whatever active PTB it is, folder. What this folder is basically if the districts or bureau want to share something additional that relates to their advertisement, they will share it here. This folder is actually pretty antiquated, so it's not like we have reminders or anything that we can send you, like if someone adds something for this ad. It's just something you'll have to check in daily if you're going for something on that bulletin to see if anything's there about your particular item. So I'm just going to roll right into advertisements and what to expect. So when you're looking at the bulletin itself, and I'll kind of go over some of the components when I do the demo, live demo, but ads are basically in district order, so District 1 through 9, and then we tack on the bureaus or any additional offices. Obviously, a bulk of our items are within the districts, between Districts 1 and 9. We do advertise 2 types of ads or 2 types of jobs, one being a work order, one being a job specific. So those are the only 2 types of jobs that we do advertise. So a work order job that we advertise, we call basically a various. And what this is it's a very general scope that you will see in an advertisement. We basically issue multiple work orders within one master agreement. And the way you set aside a work order from a job specific when you're looking at the bulletin is, for work orders, we will always tell you what the estimated engineering fee is, and that will be disclosed within the advertisement, versus a job specific. So a job specific is, when you read the advertisement, it's a very specific scope. It's a very detailed ad, or should be. The estimated engineering fee is not disclosed, and the fee is actually determined once you get selected and you actually negotiate with the project manager. So when you're looking at advertisements, and again, I'll show you this when I walk through it live, quite a bit of stuff is actually disclosed. We disclose the fund type, so if it's fairly funded, we tell you right off the bat. If it is, if it's not, then it's straight state. We tell you what the DBE goal requirement is, what the complexity factor is, when the tentative, and I say tentative because the districts have to tell me that information weeks in advance, so that initial meeting kickoff date might actually change. What the scope or what the general work is going to be, what the ratings are, completion date, if it's a work order, what the estimated engineering fee is, and then we go in and tell you what key personnel we want you to identify and if any of the categories can be performed by the sub, and then we disclose what the prime pre-qualification requirements are. So how to bid? The first thing is you have to be pre-qualified and have an approved overhead rate in EPAS. And that goes for as a prime and as a sub-consultant role. A lot of times I've had the question, hey, can I include a sub that isn't currently pre-qualified or currently approved in EPAS? The answer is no. If anyone is going to be working in any of the established pre-qualification categories we have, they have to be approved and pre-qualified and have an approved overhead rate. And the reason for that is if you were to get selected and you didn't have that approved overhead rate or you weren't pre-qualified, we don't want to hold up the agreement and wait for that firm to get that approved overhead rate so you can invoice or vice versa. If they didn't have construction inspection, we don't want to, hold our breath or hold up the agreement waiting on that firm to actually secure that pre-qualification category. Basically, once you're selected, we want to start the project as soon as possible and get you going versus waiting on the paperwork process. So how to bid. So everything is in EPAS. You would start a new statement of interest, and I'll show you that, and everything is submitted at once. A lot of times I'll have a firm ask me, hey, can I submit item 1 now and then submit my statement of interest for item 13 later? The answer is no. You submit everything as one big giant bundle at once, no going back. So when you are actually creating your statement of interest, we have some generic information you will supply first. The first thing would be like basically your financial and your non-financial contacts. Why is this important? Because those are the people that we are going to contact if we have questions about your statement of interest. You will supply with current obligations, which is basically your current work and your projected work. We use this information to determine your firm's capacity. And then the other thing would be delinquent debt for all your subconsultants and their signatures. For attachments, something that we changed, I believe last year, was the disclosures and IRAN forms are now in the SEPSI. So all you have to do is provide a checkbox to us that, yes, I disclose this in my SEPSI. And then really all you're attaching in an overall general form is your delinquent debt. So the screenshot here, and I'll walk through this again, but, you know, the forms, current odds, delinquent debt, and attachments, those are pretty generic, and that was for everything. But the next thing would be basically the nitty-gritty item attachments. So once you determine what items you're going for, you're going to have various attachments for that particular item. So when you're logging in, the first thing is your firm's interest. This has to be 2 pages. It cannot exceed 2 pages, and I'll show you the screenshot. If you exceed the 2-page limit, your SOI for that particular item will not be accepted, and you'll be rejected for that particular item, and I'll send you an email. Org chart is mandatory and required, and if the advertisement states, you know, a project approach is required, then you'll bundle it here under the org chart behind it as one PDF. For the Exhibit A, you'll disclose to us if you're proposing a teaming for that particular item, what subs you're proposing, the categories of work they'll be performing, and the estimated percent of work. You'll also disclose if you're doing a mentor protege and your staffing totals. So when I'm saying staffing totals, you will actually tell us how much staff you're estimating putting forth for this particular project. It doesn't mean to put the total amount for your firm. What I mean is, like, you know, if you have 10 engineers that work for you, you know, don't put 10 engineers unless you're putting 10 engineers for that particular item or that particular proposal. Basically, the staffing totals, it gives the district or the project manager a very good idea of how much staff you're putting forth. And it kind of gives them a good idea of, yeah, you know, this firm could, you know, do this project, or they're really short-handed. I don't think they could do the tasks at hand. So it really gives the district people or the project manager a good idea, just, you know, by looking at the staffing totals you're going to be projecting. So when you're actually entering in your staff, a project manager is required no matter what. You can only list key staff that we list within the ad, and I'll show you a screenshot. And, you know, this is something new we implemented back on PTP 206, but, you know, you cannot list extra staff. You have to follow the bullet points and list only the staff that we ask for. And, you know, what I say here, for example, use this as a checklist. So this is an example, like literally this project manager only wants to see basically the project manager you're proposing and then the person who will perform the QC/QA work. And that's it. That's all you would have to supply. And the resumes for those 2 individuals. So it's not a lot, but that's all that the district person wants to see. So that kind of segues into resumes. So when you're attaching resumes for these individuals, they shall not exceed 2 pages. It is a new rule that we recently implemented. Make sure you keep the resumes tailored to the ad or project. Don't add any fluff, you know. You have to keep in mind that when the districts get statements of interest, there are some items that have 30 or more statements of interest, and the district person has to go through all that information. You know, try to figure out what makes you stand out from your competition. And you only include resumes for the people that the ad requests, kind of like what we talked about in the previous screen. The other thing you can expect in EPAS is what's called an Exhibit A, and I'm not really going to go through that one particularly, but it's only required if environment categories or location design studies is required for that particular advertisement. Project experience, you'll see an attachment for that. Basically, this PDF shall not exceed 20 pages, and it basically is unlimited projects unless specified in the ad. And this is something I'm getting a lot of questions about for PTP 207. So for example, this was taken from one of the advertisements. statements of interest must also include the consultant's relevant projects. Do not include more than 10 relevant projects. That is 10 projects from the prime and the sub combined. It's not 10 for the prime, 10 for the sub, or however many subs. It is the district only wants to see, no more than 10 projects. And I know that can be kind of hard for some people, but again, think in mind that the district has a lot of statements of interest to go through. If you have 30 or more plus projects, it can kind of be a lot of information to take in. So pick 10 of your, most relative projects that make you a strong firm that can do this job. I know that's a big restriction that a lot of people are seeing for this particular bulletin, but it is something that we are requesting. So you could do 10 projects in 20 pages, but it has to be 10 projects if they specify it. If the district or the advertisement does not specify it, then you can do unlimited projects in 20 pages. The fourth attachment, and again, I'll show you on the demo, is additional information. And basically, this will be blank unless you're doing a teaming, and there you would actually attach the signed teaming agreement or additional information. So for this particular ad, they added a bullet point, the ability to address the requirement of immediate access to conventional drill rigs. So here you would actually add in attachment 4 your evidence that you can provide that conventional drill rig at command. Otherwise, it would be blank, right? The fifth and sixth attachment you would see under project experience. Number 5 would be Exhibit A. We've made some modifications to this back on 206. Basically, all we require is for it to be signed, and then all it does is list your key personnel. It doesn't list your subs anymore. And then number 6 is your sub-consultant utilization form, which this is, both are generated from EPAS. You just have to generate it and then reattach it. So for the sub-plan, you would reattach it, and all this shows is your sub-consultants, the categories of work, and the estimated percent. Just make sure that that information matches your electronic Exhibit A, and that does not need to be signed at the time of the statement of interest, your sub-plan. If you get selected, this will have to get signed, and then that would be turned in with your proposal packet. But other than that, there's no reason to get all your sub-consultants to sign it at the time of statement of interest, because you guys already have about 3 weeks to do a statement of interest. So I'm going to change my screen a little bit. And before I go into the EPAS part, I just want to show you where the bulletin is on the website. So if you go to Doing Business, Procurement, Engineering, Architecture, and Professional Services, everything here is in a nutshell. So if there's anything you want to know about our program or our consultant services, it's all within these tabs here. Our pre-qual, bulletin, statement of interest, compliance, and admin, stay connected. So the next step after getting pre-qualified and approved would be bulletin. So when you click on bulletin, you'll see that we revised it yesterday, and this is where you'll actually find our current bulletin. If we already did selection, you'll see the press release. So if I go to resources, it will actually go back quite a few years, but for, oh, they didn't create my 206 arm. Oh, just kidding, there it is. Huh, sorry. 206, you can see what the PTB was and the press release. So if I click on the press release, you'll be able to see who the selected firms were. So I'm going to go back. I know I'm probably flying through this, and I apologize. So when I click on the bulletin, basically our bulletin consists of quite a bit. So the cover page, it tells you when we published it, when we revised it, when the statements of interest are due, and when selection is. Help and information, if you click this, this actually takes you to our EPAS manual. And check this out, actually takes you to that negotiation information page that I was telling you about. I do know there's something here for item 41 because I actually had those posted for that particular item the other day. So there's not a lot of information out there, obviously, right now. And then if you click this, this actually takes you to the SOI entry for our EPAS manual. I'm not a fan of Edge, so I apologize. It hides my bookmarks. It kind of drives me nuts. So our bulletin consists of basically notice of revisions, contact information, again, the tentative schedule, any notices we have to share, which we have the salary cap we just published out, mileage reimbursement got changed. We talked about the EPAS SOI changes that we implemented back on PTB 206. Just some information that we want to share. We'll post it here in the bulletin. We'll talk about how you submit a statement of interest, and then the big bulk right here is basically the listing of what advertisements we have out there. So these are all hyperlinked, but this is basically the table of contents that describe all the advertisements we have out there. So if you're interested in, like, hypothetically, item 8, you can click here, and this is what the advertisement looks like. We have a generic job title that tells you what the job number is. That's more internal purposes, but you know, we're able to track by job number. This is a various phase 2 project. This is actually a various, and I can tell you that based on the title because it's various routes, various counties. And if you were to scroll down here, you can see the estimated engineering fee is disclosed. So when you're looking at an advertisement right off the bat, I know this is state funded, a 6% DB Eagle will tell you the complexity factor. This would be the kickoff meeting when you would, you know, meet with the district and bring your subs to that meeting as well. This will start off with the scope of work, what the generalization is. This is a work order, and you can tell it's also a work order because this paragraph will be in here. Work orders under the blanket agreement will be negotiated and authorized by the department on an as-need basis. Your statements of interest will be rated on the following criteria and the weighted percent. And then below this table, you will always see the completion date, which is 60 months. And then if it's a work order, the estimated engineering fee. And then this is very important right here. Key personnel that are listed on the Exhibit A must include the following. So for this particular ad, they actually have quite a few people listed. So here, of course, we have project manager, project engineer. They want to see any person who has the necessary experience with traffic signals. So these are the people they want to see resumes for. So those are the only people you will attach resumes for within the Exhibit A. It varies from ad to ad, and as you can probably tell, there's a pattern. It actually varies between districts. So this particular ad, they are actually wanting a project understanding and approach. So that would be bundled behind that org chart attachment, which I'll show you shortly in EPAS. And here they are putting a limit. They only want to see 10 relevant projects. And that, again, is the sum for prime and subconsultants. And then right here, I can tell you right now there's no subcategories, and I'll show you an example. But right here, this is what the prime has to be pre-qualified in order to submit a statement of interest on. You could do a teaming. So like hypothetically, let's say your firm has the traffic signals and traffic studies, but you don't have SCAT. So you could do a teaming with another secondary prime who has the SCAT, and you could meet the pre-qual that way. But what you cannot do is have a sub who has SCAT and apply for this category, if that makes sense. So if your firm had traffic signals and traffic studies, your firm most likely would not be considered because you're missing that SCAT, and that cannot be supplied by a subconsultant. So if I'm going to scroll down, here we go, an ad that will show you who can do the surveying. So if you're ever looking under the key personnel under Exhibit A, this right here, this statement basically is saying the surveying component can be subbed out or the prime can do it. So at least the prime only needs to do roads and streets and structures highway typical, but the surveying component can be done by the sub. So that is the bulletin in a very quick, high-level nutshell. The other thing that we do include, what we call recurring notices, are anything that we've, published in the past. Basically, we retire these notices and bundle them down here for historical purposes. So that is the bulletin in a nutshell. Obviously, it's out there. It's current. Statements of interest are actually due on the 23rd. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into my test firm, and this is in EPAS, and this is my test firm that I use a lot. So I can pretend I'm a firm to give you an idea of what you can look for. So if you scroll down, this is your SEFC table, and we talked about this a few days ago if you registered for it. But I also have a lot of YouTube videos out there that walk through that process as well. So I'm going to skip over it. I am currently not approved, so technically I cannot submit an SOI for the bulletin right now, but I'm going to pretend. So a note will be out here. A new PTB 207 is active from 2/2/23 to 2/23. You can start a new SOI to apply. So I'm going to click the button, and it takes me to this screen. Right off the bat, it will tell me, it has to be due by noon. So if I were to log in on the 23rd and I'm working frantically on my statement of interest, it's going to tell me the time and date right now. Obviously, it's going to update when I refresh. So you got some screens over here. So over here, before I get into the nitty-gritty items, we talked about forms. Really, forms is kind of misleading because we took out the disclosure and the business and I ran, and I probably should update this in EPAS. But what's important here is your financial contact and your non-financial contact. These are the people we're going to contact if we have questions or issues or need additional information from your statement of interest. So it's very, very important that you put people here that will be able to answer questions anywhere from February of, the 23rd to, basically a few weeks after your statement of interest. I've had actually firms who put people in here that go on vacation the next day. And I've actually had to mark firms not approved because I couldn't get a hold of the firm because that's who they put in there. So it's very important that you either put someone who's going to be responsive or a general mailbox that I can go to, ask questions about your statement of interest if I have issues. You don't want your firm to be marked not approved for being non-responsive. But it happens, and it has happened. Current obligations kind of touch base, but this is what it looks like. You will basically tell me if, work for IDOT, if you're as a prime or a sub, how much work you're anticipating within the next, this month to the next 6 months, 7 to 18 months, and anything greater than 18 months. That would be as a prime role, a sub role. Down here we have, work done by any other department, such as the City of Chicago, Tollway, or any other public and private areas that you're contracted out to. And then this will actually sum up your work for you, and then any phase 3 work you have for construction inspection. So we do have some instructions here that talk about it a little bit more. But if you ever have questions about anything, you can either contact myself or my general mailbox, which is dot.consultantservices@illinois.gov. I do know that's out there on the website right here. Need help? I'm not going to lie, this is my phone number, but email is probably always the best way to get a hold of me sometimes. I'm a little bit quicker at email versus my phone unless I'm sitting right next to my phone. And then our general mailbox as well. Going back to EPAS. Delinquent debt, we kind of talked about that. So as you're building your statements of interest for all those different items, you'll have your sub-consultants listed here and what items they're being proposed on. This will actually get generated right here where you click print, so it's kind of pointless because I have no subs created. But if I were to click print, it would generate a PDF for me and list out all my sub-consultants and what items I'm proposing them on. And then you would actually reattach it right here after you obtain all those signatures. Signatures, they don't have to be wet. They can be electronic. They can be digital. We're not very picky. We used to be picky, but now we're not. So I'm going to go back to the home screen. So when you're looking at the SOI home screen, it's going to actually give you all of the items we have available, which is kind of nice right now because we're right in the middle of a PTB. So I'm going to pick a few. So I'm just going to put check boxes. Let's hypothetically say I want all these items. That is a lot of work. And I'm going to click the button Insert. So right off the bat, because I'm not approved, I don't have any pre-qual categories. But if you are missing any pre-qual categories, it will show up in red here. Obviously, I'm missing all of them. But I am also going to add a specialty one just to give you an idea. I can always go back and add more items if I want. And if you actually forgot what the item was about, you can actually just click the hyperlink here. So if I was like, oh, what was item 6 again? I can click item 6. It will actually give me the PDF advertisement so I can see it without having to go back to the bulletin. that. And the same thing will be down here. So it's a hyperlink, item 2. Oh, just kidding. Item 2 takes me straight to the SOI, sorry. But at least here you can see all the items that I'm wanting to apply for. And if I wanted to change my mind, I'm like, ooh, I really didn't want item 2, I can click delete, and it will let me delete it. But it will also tell you, you know, hey, I'm going to go for 9 items as a prime. So I'm going to go ahead and click on item 5 here. So when you're ready to actually start the SOI for a particular item, you just click the item number, and it's going to take you to those screens I was talking about in my presentation. I know it's really hard. I'm a more visual person, so I feel like this helps way more than looking at slides and text. So the first things first is firm interest in photos. So here's that attachment 1 we talked about. This is your firm's interest. This can be a number of things. I've seen cover letters, I've seen cookie cutter letters, I've actually seen an outline of what the firm anticipates, I've seen where a firm is actually introducing their team. It could be a various different things, but no matter what, it cannot exceed 2 pages. And I'll kind of go through what happens once you click submit, but what will happen is my unit in design and environment, we do what's called the initial check, and we're going to open up these attachments. If I see in this attachment 1 you exceeded 2 pages, even if that 3rd page is a blank page, I'm going to email you and say, hey, I can't accept your statement of interest for item 5 because you exceeded the limit. I'm sorry. I will say I don't think that happened in 206. Everyone, I think, was afraid of that requirement, and it was all 2 pages. Yay. So attachment 2 here is the org chart. It has to be attached. It is a 1-pager, and I'm not going to lie, I have had people ask me for examples. You know, it kind of puts me in a hard spot. I cannot share with you other firms' org chart examples. I think what I will do is probably tell you to go to Google, you know, go to Google Images. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to have pictures. All it does is have to show the hierarchy, you know, in some visual format of what your firm is proposing. You know, who the leads are going to be, who your key staff, you know, who your subs are. Kind of give the district person a visual view of what the hierarchy is of your team so they have an idea of who they're going to be working with and who's going to be working for who. Now, if the advertisement does request a project understanding and approach, which it's spelled wrong, I just looked at that, and I've seen that probably 5 times, and I keep forgetting to correct it. I need to make a note of that. That's pretty bad. Spelling is not my forte. It will be bundled here under the org chart as one PDF. So when you go over here to Exhibit A, oh, and no matter what, this is a hyperlink. So if you're like, what was, you know, like add 5, click this. It takes you to the PDF. You click View, and there's the PDF from the bulletin. So here under Exhibit A, we have some logistics here that you have to supply. This city is the city that you work, you know, your office is working from. Some of the larger firms might have, let's say, 5 different offices. So what you're going to do here is list the city that you are proposing, you know, your team's going to be working from. So let's say this project's in Chicago and you have an office in Springfield and an office in Chicago. You know, you most likely would be saying my Chicago office. So this will help the district get an idea of where you're actually, your home office for this project will be. So if you put Chicago, they're going to be like, oh, okay, your proximity is pretty close because you're in Chicago. But if you put Springfield, they're going to be like, okay, so you're about 3 hours away. It gives them an idea of how close you are to the proposed project, or at least to their district. If you're doing a teaming, you would tell me here, a teaming is different than subs. Teaming is actually what used to be called joint venture. We don't call it joint venture anymore because the Secretary of State office actually wanted our firms to do a joint tax identification number, which, let's talk about messy paperwork. We didn't want to do that anymore. So we actually got away from calling it a joint venture and called it a teaming. So think of teaming as a joint venture, but we're just not calling it a joint venture because it's too messy with the Secretary of State to actually get a agreement through the system. But if you were to add it, you would add it here, and let's see if I can find my test firm. I have another one out there. B test firm. You know, I would say, oh, here's my B test firm. If I click edit, I'm going to say, you know, what the person's email is. And honestly, I would probably copy and paste it because everybody has, you know, human error at one point. And if you don't get their email address right, they're not going to get an email. So I'm going to say that they're doing 35%. And it will show. And then I'm going to actually put in the categories of work they're going to be performing. Ooh, there's my team name. Next would be your subs. So here is actually where you would actually list out the sub-consultants that are going to be doing work for you. I don't think I have another test firm. So I could pick on someone. I'll do ESI. I'm going to pick ESI. So if ESI was doing sub for me, I would then go here and pick what categories of work they're going to be doing for this project. Something that I see some firms do is they actually list all the pre-qualification categories. So for example, ESI has quite a few different categories of work. I'm not going to go in here and select all of them. You know, please don't do that because that also misrepresents your firm. It kind of tells the district people you don't know what this project is about. Because if you put all 20 plus pre-qual categories that firm has, you know, the district person is going to look at your sub-plan and be like, I didn't ask for all those categories of work. You know, they're not going to be working public involvement on this particular item. Clearly, the firm doesn't understand what what this project is, and you might get rated low because of that error. So make sure when you are putting in your subcategories, you are only listing the categories of work that that firm is going to be performing in. So when I click edit here, you'll tell me how much percent, an estimated percent that firm will be doing. I understand that's kind of hard for work orders because, you might not know entirely, but it's basically what we call an estimated work percent. The other firm table, I really probably should remove this, not going to lie. The other firm table we used to actually use for public involvement, which is now pre-qual category, steel fabrication, bridge painting inspections. So firms that aren't pre-qualified that do specialty work, essentially. This is not a table where you're like, I want to use a firm that's not currently pre-qualified in roads and streets and I'm going to put them here. That's not what that's for. Because if you actually put a firm in here that is doing work in a pre-qualification category, you will get an email from my office asking you to remove them from your statement of interest. So it's probably best just to stay away from this table. If you're doing a mentor protege, you'll tell me here who the protege firm is, which actually will be pulling from your list here. So obviously I didn't propose a DVE firm, so there's no firm that I can actually protege right now. Staffing totals, again, this is the people that you are proposing for this particular project, the number of people, not the total number of your firm. So let's just say, 2 engineers, 1 surveyor, maybe like 2 others. Click save. The next part is the Exhibit A staffing. So this is item 5. So if I go to item 5, and I'm going to look at my quote-unquote checklist, this is a construction inspection job. So I want to see the liaison engineer, the assistant engineer, the materials coordinator, the survey chief, the material QA technicians, doc techs. So these are the people that I actually have to list out. I will say right now, one thing that does get confusing, and we do get common questions for, is, hey, EPAS requires a project manager. This advertisement doesn't require a project manager. What do I do? I'm not going to lie, in probably some of the future bulletins, I'll probably remove that project manager requirement. But for these construction inspection jobs where it doesn't list a project manager, I would assume the liaison engineer as that project manager role. Or at least, if they put resident engineer or liaison, whoever the main engineer is, that's probably going to be what is, quote, unquote, the project manager as a whole. Or you'll just list a project manager, even though there's not one listed here, because it is a requirement in EPAS right now. So this is where you'll actually list your staff. So, and if I had any professional registration, and I would attach my 2-page resume because that is required. So I'm not going to go really too far into the staffing here. So Exhibit B, like I talked about in the slides, it's only required if certain categories are required. So if I was doing an environment job, Exhibit B would be displayed. I'm going to skip over and go to project experience. So here's where we're talking about the various attachments. Attachment number 3 is basically your experience. So right here it says it shall not exceed 20 pages and all work has to be done within the past 10 years. It kind of follows the flow from our pre-qual requirements. Now again, like we talked about, if you are going for an ad, so it's item 5 for example, they didn't have anything additional. So for this one, they didn't put a cap or a limit on projects, so technically I could take up 20 pages showing, you know, an unlimited number of projects. But if I was going on a different item, like item 4, for example, and it's saying only 10 projects, then I would have to restrict this attachment to showing only 10 projects. Okay, going back here. And, you know, this is optional. For this particular ad, it's not required by any means. So for item 5, they're not asking for any experience, but, you know, it's probably best if you did attach something so they have something to relate to. Attachment 4, it should be blank unless it's a teaming. So I hypothetically added a teaming, so I would attach my teaming agreement here. When I'm looking at item 5, they had nothing additional, so otherwise it would be blank. And this would just be in a blank field, nothing would be attached. So if I did attach staff, or I mean, you know, put staff in under that staffing screen here, when I click print, let's see if it'll pull up, it would actually summarize all the staff that I proposed. I didn't propose any staff, so this is blank, but I would print this out and I would sign it, or I could do a digital or electronic signature. That is also acceptable. And then I would reattach it right here and select it. Ooh, go back. Probably shouldn't have clicked that because now my computer's going to bog down. The subplan, so when you click print, it would actually summarize all the information you put. I don't think I proposed any. Oh, I did. I put B test firm because I'm teaming with them. And then I had ESI. So all you got to do is make sure that your categories of work match up to your electronic exhibit A and your percent. You know, just make sure that that's accurate. This is probably something you're going to generate very, very last. This is a common error we see for when we send it back for additional information to firms when we're reviewing your statement of interest, is if your subs don't match what you put in EPAS, we send it back and have you correct it. And then summary and submit. Now this is only if everything is done. So I had 9 different items I was going to go for. So all 9 items have to actually be ready to submit. Obviously right now I am missing a ton of information. So the system is actually not going to let me submit. But if I was able to submit, it would let me check a box and then click the button submit. And then if you went back to EPAS, the home screen, you would be able to see your submit date timestamped. I'm not going to lie, I've told firms before, if you do submit a statement of interest and you want that verification that you received, that IDOT received it, you can always email me and I will send you a screenshot and be like, yep, here's your timestamp, this is when we received it. You know, if I was a firm, I would probably do it. It doesn't bother me because it's kind of like part of just the job at the end of the day, I feel like, because you're verifying that we did receive your statement of interest. I'm not voluntarily asking for more emails, but I do understand just making that verification. So I think that is my run through on the SOI portion. And we talked about the website, where to find the bulletin. We talked about the components of the bulletin. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my slides because I have a few extra tidbits. So just a few reminders. You know, make sure you keep to that 2-page limit that we talked about. That's something we implemented back on PTB 206. So far, everyone has followed the rules. Oh, I'm going too fast. We have a very, very harsh deadline of noon. There are no exceptions. I will tell you, PTB 206, I had a firm where their teaming partner did not submit a statement of interest. The firm was very upset with me because I did not accept it, and I'm not going to lie, it's a harsh deadline of noon. If you're doing a teaming, make sure you are communicating with your teaming partner that they still submit a statement of interest. I'm not going to go into logistics, but in our EPAS manual, there are requirements that your teaming partner has to supply in order for that teaming to be accepted as a whole. So because their teaming partner didn't submit by noon, they got disqualified for that particular item. Like I said, there are no exceptions. It is a very, very harsh deadline of noon that day. Don't wait till the last hour to submit. This actually used to be big a few years back, and I don't know if after doing presentations for so long, people are kind of getting it, the hang of it, but just don't wait till the last hour. If, I know it's a lot of information. I know you have to prepare a lot within 3 weeks' time, but plan for computer or internet failure on your end. I have had firms contact me 15 minutes before noon, so 11:45, and lucky for them, I sit here by my phone and my desk making sure nobody has, a database error or anything like that, or if they have a question, I will try to make sure we can get you submitted on time. But again, don't put yourself in that situation or myself, because if I'm not here for, some reason, or I'm talking to another firm, that would put your firm at risk, right? So plan for failure, make sure you submit as early as possible, because you don't want basically all that hard work that you've put to go basically be lost and not accounted for. Org chart is mandatory. I was going to say, one example is you have to go to Google or, some other search engine. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to have pictures. It just has to be some sort of visual to show the project manager, the organization that you're proposing for that particular ad. Don't use old org charts with outdated staff. Not going to lie, you probably think that's funny, but it has happened. We have had where firms have actually submitted org charts where people have either left, retired, or moved to another firm. Current obligations, when you're entering in your current work, it is in thousands and not in whole numbers. So if you put $1 million, I will most likely email you and be like, hey, do you really have $1 billion worth of work? If you do, wow, that's really impressive. Most likely you'll give me corrections. Don't put yourself in that boat, though, because it does botch up my reports to the districts and selection committee, and it will actually make your firm look like you're over capacity. It's not something that I can have you correct if I send it back for additional information. So if you do enter your current obligations in whole numbers, it will make your firm appear over capacity. So, I try to manually change the reports when I send them out, but when the districts are looking at the statements of interest, they'll see that. Make sure you tailor your experience and the projects to the ad. List available personnel. Try not to overcommit. I know that's probably hard, and I've talked to law firms because, I'm on the state side, so I do understand as a firm that's got to be hard to put together your teams, the available personnel that you have. Sorry. This weather change is getting to me. Make sure when you're doing resumes, don't put so much fluff in there. Keep it to the point. Think of the districts who have to review maybe 30-plus statements of interest. What makes your firm stand out? They won't want to read paragraphs and paragraphs and pages and pages. Try to keep it to the point for sure. So the last little part here is what happens next. So I have a really beautiful workflow here. So when you submit your statement of interest, the Bureau Design Environment, my small unit here, we will review and do a few cursory overview checks. That first one is going to be that 2-pager, making sure your Exhibit A is signed, make sure you have a teaming agreement if you have a teaming, and making sure your sub-plan matches your Exhibit A. If we ask for additional information, your firm has 3 days to comply. I'm not going to lie. Pretty much everyone we have additional information with, they turn it around within the next hour or that day, and that's amazing. It's fabulous. There's been a rare occasion where I have actually had to mark a firm not approved for being non-responsive. So just make sure that, within that first week after you submit, you're checking your email. if you are the person that's going to get the emails. We will reject your SOI at this level, and it won't go any farther if you didn't follow instructions, and like I said, not responsive to IDOT's requests. So if we quote-unquote approve it, it then goes to the district, who will review your statement of interest, and then they will rate the statements of interest, and then they will send me their ratings through EPAS, and I will prep reports for the selection committee. So the selection committee will then, we meet depending on how big the bulletin is. Sometimes it's a 2-dayer, but no matter what, we will always release the results the day on the schedule. So for this particular bulletin, the press release will go out, I will tell you right now, after lunch in the afternoon on the 19th. And I say that because we have to do a lot of QA/QCing here in the office before we even release that information. So when I'm here, you can see currently our selection committee is made up of 8 different members. We have a chairman, we have the director of OPMP, we have the Bureau Chief of Design and Environment, we have the Bureau Chief of Operations, and then we have 3 outside public members that are appointed. And then we have the appropriate regional engineer or bureau chief. So, for example, if it's a District 1 ad, Jose Rios will be here, part of the selection committee, for all of District 1's advertisements. If it was District 4, we have Kenzel, Kenzel is actually our chairman. So you kind of get the idea. So that is the 8th person that makes up selection. And obviously, as you all know, it's quality-based, it's not low cost. So once we do selection, Bureau of Design Environment, we will do the press release, and we will send out via email. And the other part of Design Environment will actually do what's called the selection email. So if you are selected, you actually get a personal email sent to you to notify that you have been selected for that particular item. If you're not selected, we don't send out an email to you. You'll just see the press release. So that's the process in a giant nutshell. It is a very, very strict schedule that we have, like we talked about. So I do want to wrap up with some resources and where you can locate it. So the biggest part here is the EPAS Manual Section 8. That section will walk you through how to do a SOI and give you some detailed screenshots. So like I said, if you ever have questions, give me a call, shoot me an email. It never hurts to ask questions, right? Because at least then you know, and if I can't tell you the answer, I'll let you know as well. We do have a YouTube playlist out there where we have different recordings of different sessions, so that's a hyperlink to that. We have done an SOI feedback presentation a few times. Me and my supervisor, who is Jack Elston, who is the Bureau Chief of Design Environment, we've done that presentation quite a bit in the past few years. It is recorded out there, and it's something I would probably watch. It's us relaying feedback that we got from the districts. So I did a survey, and I asked the districts various questions about statements of interest, and that was basically a summary of what their responses were. If you're not already, please subscribe to my subscription service. It is out there under the Stay Connected tab, and there's instructions on how you subscribe. That subscription service is very important because if I publish the bulletin, I attach it there, so you'll get it before it's even posted to the website. Same thing with the press release. I have to submit an IT ticket for it to get posted to the website. So what I do is I send it out to the subscription service right then and there, so you get it before it's on the website, most likely. Although I will say our IT is very quick on getting stuff out on the website, so I'm very lucky for that. If we have any changes, any form updates, we do it all through our subscription service. So very, very important to be subscribed. And also a hyperlink to our YouTube playlist, which I talked about. So at that point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I apologize. And see if there's any questions. So
There does appear to be a question from one of the attendees. It says, we are pre-qualified, but 2021 overhead rates have not been approved yet by IDOT. How do we participate as a subconsultant if 2021 rates have not been approved?
I guess, for that particular firm, shoot me an email, but if what they're saying is their pre-qual's done, but their overhead rate's not done, and they're a brand new firm in EPAS, they cannot submit as a sub. Just because, let's say hypothetically, your firm has been pre-qualified and approved with us, and your latest overhead rate is from 2020 because your 2021 hasn't been approved yet, you can by all means be applying as a sub or a prime because you're still on that pre-qual list, right? But if you're a brand new firm and your overhead rate is not done and you can't generate that approval letter and you're not on our pre-qual list, then you cannot participate. So I guess real quick, I'll share my screen. One moment. So something I talked about on the last session is the list of pre-qualified firms. So if your name is not on that list, you cannot, apply to be a sub-consultant. So we have it in PDF and Excel form. So I hope I answered what they were talking about. And if they do have further questions, they can email me. So, and if that's the only question.
I had a question myself. I was just going to ask for clarification if you could. You mentioned the org chart as part of the submittal package. If a firm has been selected and they're under contract and the org chart staffing changes during the contract, are they required to submit a revised org chart to the department?
So I guess it would depend. I know if you watch our SOI feedback presentation, we talk about bait and switch, but not going to lie, personnel changes do happen. I think that would be something you'd have to probably talk to us here in the Bureau of Design Environment and the IDOT or the district project manager if that were to happen. So that would definitely be a unique case, I would say.
Good morning. Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Okay, my name is Musa with HPM Engineering. I have a question about the example that you showed, that the liaison only resident engineer is the one in charge in a construction job for say. But when we present the organization chart, there should be somebody always in charge of it, which is the PM, project manager. Can we show him as two hats? Can we show him like in the project manager role as well as the engineer? Is that okay?
Yeah, I would see that as being appropriate. And kind of like I touched base on, I think I'm going to take that requirement away because we've had so many questions about the project manager requirement in EPAS, and some of our ads do not list out specifically a project manager. So we've kind of had to massage it in based on what advertisement you're going for.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's one more question here. For the firm count, should we include additional personnel count to support if they are not in our org chart as key personnel but would participate in the project? Yes, for sure. So if you have additional people that you're not displaying on your org chart, you can definitely include them in the staffing totals. So your org chart and your staffing totals technically do not have to add up, because your org chart is more like a high-level overview versus your staffing totals is a little bit more nitty-gritty and detailed. The second part to that is, should we include additional people on the org chart if they are not key personnel on Exhibit A? Yes, you can by all means do that. And then, Joy, I see you have your hand up if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
You've all the way through talked about things that you would follow up with the firm if they were wrong in the statement of interest, but other things you've talked about kicking you out altogether. Can you generalize on which type of errors kick you out altogether versus which ones can be corrected?
So the biggest one right now would be if you exceed that 2-page limit. So if you exceed the 2-page limit, we don't give you a chance to fix that. We would mark your SOI for that particular item. So like, let's say you applied for 5 items and item 1, you have 3 pages for some reason. Item 1, you would not be considered. So then we would follow up with an email on that. The second one would be non-responsive. That's happened, but it's not very often. So if we asked you for additional information, like let's say your sub plan does not match like the subs that you're proposing, and your firm ignores our email request, we would mark you as non-responsive, basically because our office is put under a very, very strict time frame to turn these around for the districts so they can review it. So it is a very strict 3-day limit for that additional information. The third thing would be if your teaming partner does not submit. So if you were to go in and, like we talked about, a joint venture type deal, your teaming partner, your secondary prime, has to submit a statement of interest, and it kind of depends if they're going for other items or if that's the only item. I would highly recommend looking at our EPAS manual for what they are required to submit. But if they don't submit, then your team gets disqualified for that particular item. The fourth one I didn't really touch base on too much, but it is pre-qual. So there is a chance where, let's say, for example, you submit for, I'm trying to think, I'll be very generic here. Let's say roads and streets project, and you currently only have construction inspection, but you feel as a firm that you can definitely do the highway, roads, and streets project. I don't advertise this very much because given the fact that we are very behind on getting approvals out, it does take a lot longer for the CEFC to get approved. But there is, I call it kind of the loophole, right? So you could essentially apply for that highway, roads, and streets job, even though you don't have it. So you would see that red error message on that EPAS screen where it's like, hey, you're missing the roads and streets pre-qual category. You could still apply for it, and what would happen is once I receive your statement of interest, I would follow back up with you and be like, hey, I see you're not pre-qualified. Is this something you're wishing to pursue? And if you say yes, I will expedite your CEFC in hopes that we can turn it around, have you do an amended CEFC to apply for highways, roads, and streets 3 days before selection. I've had about a 90 to 95 success rate on doing that. I mean, there has been instances where we couldn't turn a firm around quick enough for them to reapply, but it is possible. So I hope that answers the question as a whole.
Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I don't see any questions in the Q&A or additional questions in the chat, so.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks.
Is this recorded? Can we watch it later on?
Yes, it is being recorded, and it'll be forwarded to the attendees for today's workshop, so you should be receiving that in your email.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
And I'll send it to you and all the other attendees.
Okay, I'll see you next week.
See you then. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'd also like to add that if you have any questions or need technical assistance, the supportive service representatives for the Department of Transportation are listed here on the screen now. In districts 1 through 3, we have Oneida Engineering Solutions, Don Miller, Laura Finley, and Todd Matheson. Districts 4 through 6, Herman and Associates. We have Alicia Herman from the Peoria area that covers those districts. In districts 7 through 9, we have EFK Mullen with John Scheibel and Jeff Church for those districts. We also have the staff for ESI Consultants Limited, which covers statewide. We have Dave Clark, who is our director for the program, along with myself, Ron Brown. We have Steve DeWitt in our Charleston office, Vinu Patel in the Chicago area, along with Kevin Hayes and Brent Zittner and Tina Ballin. So if you have any concerns or questions or need assistance in the technical components of your company, feel free to give us a call or send us an email. We will be in attendance next week at the TCTR DBE conference. So looking forward to seeing everybody there and putting some names with the faces.
Thank you, Ron.
So I believe with that, everybody have a good weekend and we will talk to you soon. Thank you.